The Star Sport podcast is brought to you by Access Credit Union. Access Credit Union, funding dreams for over 50 years.
Close your eyes and pull like a dog.
And a new Irish record for Phil Healy, 22.99.
Christy Cooney hands over the Sam Maguire Cup to Graham Canty, Cork All-Ireland champions for the 7th time ever.
So hello and welcome to another episode of the Star Sport podcast. I'm your host Matthew Hurley and I'm joined today as always by Star Sport editor Kieran McCarthy. The Star Sport podcast is brought to you in association with our friends at Access Credit Union. Access Credit Union, where your bank really does matter. Choose credit union, choose local, choose community. Now on today's show we will be joined by Moira Barrett and Niamh Kennedy before Carbery Camogie's clash with Blackrock this weekend in the County Senior Camogie Championship this Sunday. But first we'll look at some other stories hitting the headlines in West Cork, particularly with the club action on in the hurling and the football. I suppose there's a big weekend of football action here, but before that we'll get in briefly to the hurling because there was some interesting stories from a West Cork point of view. 3 clubs progressed to the knockout stages in various grades: Bandon, Kilbrittain and Carbery Rangers. Bandon progressed in the Intermediate A Championship, beating Mayfield 125 to 115. Kilbrittain beat Nemo Rangers 319 to 110 to progress to the Premier Junior semi-finals, going straight through there. Argideen lost to Ballinascarthy 26 points to 214, but still progressed to the quarterfinals. Barriour in a relegation playoff, they lost to Clonakilty 125 to 19. But I think, in fairness, in the Premier Senior grade, that's probably the main one because Newcestown, yes, they didn't progress. They won at the weekend 321 to 120 against Newtown Chandram. They didn't progress to the next round because of Middleton beating Charleville in the other game in that group. But to be fair to Newcestown, 3 points on the board. They finished 7th in the overall rankings in the Premier Senior Hurling Championship, which is absolutely brilliant from West Cork Club. And considering as well, they were dual club that are doing well in both codes as well. To get 3 points, to avoid relegation, to have the season that they had. I know Niall O'Sullivan would be disappointed, Kieran, but still they should be very proud of themselves.
Yeah, 100%. And Niall O'Sullivan said after last weekend's game that there were a lot of positives for Newcestown to take into 2026, and he's bang on the money there. Like you said there, Matthew, Newcestown finished as the 7th best club in the Premier Senior Premier Senior Hurling Championship. Which is some going. You know, they will take a lot of positives from this year. They got their first win in this at this grade. They finished in 3 points. It's just there's a platform here to build on because I suppose Newcestown didn't want to get kind of dragged into that relegation kind of situation, that relegation playoff, and they haven't. You know, kind of perhaps unlucky to miss out on the knockout stages. But when you're juggling Premier Senior hurling and football, it's week in, week out. It's incessant for them to do what they're doing. It's just, I know it's kind of an overused phrase when you're talking about Newcestown, but it is remarkable in many respects that a kind of a rural dual club like this continues to defy the odds. You know, kind of you're thinking of like the really top dual clubs, you're thinking of clubs up around the city, but look at Newcestown, you know, through to the knockout stages of the Premier Senior Football Championship with a game to spare, and they're taking on Castlehaven in a top of the table clash this Sunday. Look at the hurling, they finished 3rd in Group 2 behind Middleton and Charleville, and look at Newtown Chandram, who finished on 0 points. You know, so they've done incredibly well. And there's, like I said, Matthew, there's a platform there for Newcestown hopefully to kick on in 2026.
Absolutely so. And look at the other clubs there, Bandon, Kilbrittain and Carbery Rangers progressing to the knockout stages as well. I suppose we kind of had to discuss hurling in the past few months, considering the Cork hurling team's rise and things like that. But isn't it great from a local point of view that these sides are in the knockout stages and rise the profile in many ways of West Cork hurling, particularly like the likes of Bandon, who did very well in the county leagues as well. Kilbrittain going straight through to the semi-finals in the Premier Junior grade. It's great to see these stories.
100%. Like, if you're thinking from a pure Carbery point of view, we've got 5 clubs competing in the county hurling championships. That's from the Premier Senior level down to the Premier Junior. Look at Newcestown. They're just missed out on the knockout stages of the the Premier the Premier Senior. Go down to Intermediate A. We've Bandon through to quarter-final. They're going to play Aaron's Own there on Saturday, September 20th. Then dropping down another grade, we've Argentine Rangers and Kilbrittain both through to the knockout stages, and Kilbrittain flying high straight through to semi-final. So that's 4 out of the 5 teams who've done really well so far this season. Barry Rowe haven't done so well. They've lost their 3 group games, and they've a relegation playoff against Mealan coming up in just over a week's time, where I suppose their Premier Junior status is on the line, and that'll actually have a knock-on effect at the Carbery Junior A hurling level about how many teams get relegated from that grade. But on the whole, it's been really positive for Carbery hurling teams, and it's like you said, Matthew. I suppose we have talked an awful lot about Cork hurling on this podcast this year, and that's with good reason, because the Cork hurling team achieved an awful lot. League champions, Munster champions, getting to an All-Ireland final. It was mostly positive news. So for that to kind of, here we are, kind of mid-September already, and we've so many Carbery hurling teams kind of going well and playing well. I think it's good news for hurling locally.
It definitely is, and I'm sure we will discuss hurling more in next week's podcast as we look at the knockout stages in those relevant competitions. Look at the football. There is a lot of action to digest in the lead up to the final weekend of the football county championships, and we'll start off with the Premier Senior grade, where I suppose it's a bit underwhelming in terms of the knockout drama in many ways. 5 of the 6 places are already decided before this weekend. Ballinascarthy and Douglas will decide who will be the last spot in that. But there are 2 West Cork derbies in the Premier Senior grade on Sunday at 4 p.m. The first one being Clonakilty against Carbery Rangers in Ballinascarthy. The other being Castlehaven against Newcestown in Rossmore. 2 completely different games in many ways. Clonakilty and Carbery Rangers, putting it straight, the loser of this game will be in the relegation playoff if there is a loser. If it's a draw, it'll depend on the scoring difference, and Clonakilty could then be in trouble there. Castlehaven and Newcestown, they're playing for a semi-final spot. Both are through to the knockout stages already. Castlehaven are in the driving seat at this present moment in time in terms of getting the automatic semi-final spot. They're on a plus 17 goal difference, or scoring difference. Niamh Rangers are on plus 10, and they're playing St. Michael's at the weekend, so that could all change on Sunday at 4 p.m. But 2 interesting games there involving West Cork teams, Kieran.
Yeah, it's like you said, there's going to be a really busy weekend, and you're looking at that Premier Senior grade, that Clonakilty Ross game. Like, that's huge match, isn't it? It really is. Like, it's the 2 local rivals. They're only 10 minutes apart in terms of where their headquarters are, and they're meeting in a game which is effectively a relegation semi-final. Okay, there are different permutations where a draw could be enough. I suppose it depends on the Nemo St. Michael's game in Group C. And you look at the last couple of games between Ross and Clon, they have finished a draw in the Premier Senior grade, but that's a huge game for both Clonakilty and Carbery Rangers. You mentioned earlier too about Castlehaven and Newcestown. It's a huge game too, but for different matters, both of them are already through to the knockout stages. But Castlehaven will have their eyes kind of set on the direct route to the semi-final. But then you have to take into account Nemo against St. Michael's. If Nemo put up a big score against St. Michael's, all of a sudden it could come down to scoring difference to see who that top club is. If it's a Haven that gets past Newcestown, so there's still a bit to play for, and then go down through the grades, Matthew, like Dohenys and O'Donovan Rossa. That's a big one, because potentially either of those 2 could end up theoretically in the relegation playoff at the end of play on Sunday. So it's there is a lot in the line for West Cork clubs. If I ask you, Matthew, what's the one game that stands out for you this weekend? If you could go to one game, I know we haven't even done our markings inside the Star here. We don't know who's going to what game, but if you could go to one game this weekend in the football, what would it be?
Interesting question. Looking at the significance of it in many ways in terms of both ends of the table, as you mentioned there, Dohenys and O'Donovan Rossa is definitely one that looks very, very intriguing, considering O'Donovan Rossa, if they win the game, could be in the knockout stages, depending on the Ballinascarthy, Gearing and Bishopstown results elsewhere. But if they lose that game against Dohenys, suddenly they're in a relegation playoff against probably Fermoy. So it could go either way for O'Donovan and Rossa there. It is a derby as well. Dohenys would want to save themselves. Obviously, only a win would save Dohenys from relegation playoffs. So they'd be gunning to go on and win this game as well, considering their first two performances. Castlehaven, Newcestown, yes, a bit underwhelming, but it is very interesting when you look at the maths and everything else can happen and things like that. Like, I take the hurling, for example. Last weekend, SARS thought they were in a semi-final after beating Glen Rovers. They thought their job was done. But then suddenly Blackrock win by 22 points against Douglas. There could be a similar scenario here with Nemo against Michaels. You just never know. It's going to be very, very interesting. Clon and Ross, very considering the permutations of it and considering the meetings between the two sides. Like, Clon haven't beaten Ross in the championship since 2006. That in itself
It's incredible. It is
it's
incredible, isn't
it's an incredible kind of record in many ways, and considering the context as well. That was Carbery Rangers' first year back or in the senior grade in Cork as well. So Clon would want to, not just in terms of saving themselves from a relegation playoff potentially, but in terms of writing that record, they'd want to do that as well against their nearest rivals.
100%. Like, I was like, that's an astounding record in some ways when you consider Clonakilty's tradition as a senior club. And like you mentioned there, 2006 was Ross Carbery's first up at senior level. They'd won the All-Ireland, Munster and County Intermediate the year before. That was part of Carbery Rangers' rise. But in that very first meeting between Ross and Clon at senior level, I think Ross were Johnny Murphy was suspended and John Hayes was injured, and Clon won at a canter. But since then, it's either been a draw or Carbery Rangers have won, so it's kind of, when I mentioned earlier about how close, like, they're neighbouring clubs, kind of, they're only just a couple of minutes apart. Like, there is a healthy rivalry there, and that's all part of the GA, and that's why we love the GA, to have that kind of that rivalry in the kind of those and that local community. So you have this game in Ballinascarthy on Sunday where Clonakilty need a win, but they haven't beaten Carbery Rangers in a senior championship game in 19 years. Carbery Rangers need to avoid defeat, but realistically they need to win. You can't go into the game thinking, oh, if a draw will do us here. Carbery Rangers want to win this game too. So I think that's a really intriguing game, because you have two big, proud West Cork senior football teams. Kind of, they've both been county champions, like, in the last 15, 16 years. 2016 was when Ross won it for the first only time. 2009, Clon won it last. But when you go back to 2021, when Clon are actually in the county final. So these are big names when it comes to senior football in West Cork. But look at Carbery Rangers. They were in the relegation playoff against Éire Óg last year, and they got through that. So they don't want to go back into that sort of tense situation again. So I think it's a huge game. It's a massive game, and you're talking there, Matthew. It's four big West Cork clubs: Carbery Rangers, Clonakilty, O'Donovan Rossa, and Dohenys. Two of those four could theoretically find themselves in relegation playoffs at the end of the weekend. Kind of, hopefully none of them will. Kind of, if we can have a set of permutations where they all survive, brilliant. But that's, you could be looking at that. So there's an awful lot on the line. We're talking about the teams that are going through to the knockout stages, and it's great to see, like, Adrigole are already through, and we've Gabriel Rangers and Island Rovers are in a great position in intermediate A. Obviously Newcestown, Castlehaven, and so on. But it's at the other end too. There's an awful lot on the line this weekend.
There is, exactly so, and the intermediate A grade, as you mentioned there, three West Cork sides doing really well at this present moment of time. Adrigole already through to the knockout stages, played Ballinor Money Volahan on Saturday at 4 p.m. Adrigole could seal their place in the semi-final in that competition. Then in Ahiol, you have Island Rovers against St. Vincent's at the same time, and Gabriel Rangers facing Drumtarf and Castletown Kinna. Both Gabriel Rangers and Island need to avoid defeat to make the knockout stages, and considering their form this year, they were in a very good position to do so. Look at the Premier Intermediate Championship. There was a lot of permutations to go around there as well. Out of the three West Cork sides in that, Castletown Bear look at the best position to get into the knockout stages. They're on 2 points, with Kishgame and Macroom both on 1 point below the Meavlera over the hills, obviously on 4 points. But Castletown Bear only need a draw in Newcestown on Saturday at 6 p.m. against Kishgame to progress. Bantry Blues, you mentioned big clubs, big West Cork clubs in relegation playoffs. Bantry Blues are another club that could end up in that situation at the end of the weekend. They're facing Niamh Rangers B team in Ross Carbery on Saturday at 6 p.m. But also, they could make the knockout stages as well. So you never know, obviously, with these permutations. And then Niamh Vaughan face Bandon in Kilmichael at 6 p.m. on Saturday. Bandon could still progress, but they need a lot to go their way. Obviously, added on to a Bandon win as well. They need Rock Chapel to beat Glanmire elsewhere, but not by too much as well, considering scoring difference. So, a lot of permutations there. I suppose Bantry Blues is probably the biggest game in terms of the significance of this game in terms of promotion and relegation potentially.
Yeah, looking here at the tables across the competition, and Bantry Blues, they're the only team at you in 0 points after the opening 2 rounds. So Bantry's need for a win, it's quite stark. Like they need a result against Nemo this weekend. And like you said, if Bantry get the win that they need, and if Bullock beat Ahada, you could have a position where Bantry go from bottom of the group to second and get through to the knockout stage, which would be quite a turnaround. Bantry have been, go back over the last couple of years, getting the county finals at this grade. They weren't too far away from even moving up the ladder, but here they are now finding themselves in this position this weekend, going into, like we said, it's a massive game on Saturday evening in Ross Carbery against Nemo. The missing Rory Dean, like he's kind of been the talisman for this team over the last couple of years, and he's obviously been injured, hasn't featured so far. So they've missed kind of a leader like him, and I know they've been carrying a couple of other injuries as well. So that obviously hasn't helped their cause. But the need is great for Bantry to get a result, and if they get that win they need, that'll get them safe, But they just have to find a performance from somewhere.
They definitely do, yeah. And obviously there is some very interesting games up and down the grades. One more as well in the Premier Junior Championship. Oran plays St. Nick's and Dunman win the Premier Junior Championship on Friday at 7:30. Oran need a win in normal circumstances. A draw would do them if Ballydesmond managed to beat Camogie elsewhere, which, well, Ballydesmond's are on 1 point at the moment, Camogie are on 2 points. So look at that kind of prediction there. It looks very unlikely that will happen. So Oran need to beat St. Nick's, who are in very good form themselves, on 3 points in that group. So Oran are another West Cork side that need a win realistically this weekend too.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, again, I'm just looking at the tables here on the Cork GA website, and it's one of those weekends, Matthew, kind of there's so many games on, like across all the grades. It's like kind of between social media and the different permutations and stuff. There'll be a lot of texts in the WhatsApp groups this weekend. But like I said, Oran they're sitting on 2 points, in Group 1. St. Nick's leading the way on 3. Then it's Camogie, Oran, and Ballydesmond. So hopefully Oran can get the result that they need to get through to the knockout stages. Oran have been kind of knocking on the door the last couple of years as such. Kind of the Premier Junior grade is ideal for Oran, because if you go back to before, the way it was before this grade was introduced, it was so tough. Trying to come out of Beara. Some years they were just automatically kind of into the county series, and then they'd go play games after the back of no divisional games. So this has worked out well for they're getting 3 competitive games, and now they're going into the final round and they have a chance. They have a chance taking on Nick's this Friday in Dunmanway. If they can get the win that they need, could be a good weekend for Oran.
Definitely so, and there's a lot of permutations that can happen in the county championships over the weekend. And look at the Carbery championships for a sec as well. Kilmacabey and Barry are the only 2 sides already in the quarterfinals in the Southwest Division. There's 6 spots available, 11 sides fighting for it. So it's going to be a very interesting weekend in that competition as well. Obviously, Barry Rowan and Kilmacabey already through. Roynahane is very, very interesting. Like there's Todd McCorry's up top with 3 points, obviously. Ballinascarthy at the bottom with 1 point. And then obviously that group could go in any way. Kilmacabey face Carbery Rangers in another group. Carbery Rangers are as good as true. Kilmeen need a lot to go their way in that group as well. But there's a lot of stuff that can happen. St. James's are in very big danger going out of the championship at the group stages as well. So a lot can happen in the Carbery championship as well. So I think from the Southwest Championship's point of view, there's a lot that's going on this weekend in that championship as well.
It is we've, suppose, just to give our listeners an update, we've this week's Southern Star put debate, the Star Sport that's out on this Thursday morning. That's done and dusted now, and that's being cooked up as we speak. But we're already turning our attention towards the weekend, And it's just an incredibly busy weekend of G action. It always is, the final round games and in the football championships, because there's just so many games on. And we talked about the different permutations there, Matthew, of at county level. It's just as exciting for the local clubs in the Carbery Junior A football championship, and obviously the Junior B football championship is kind of ongoing as well. But even taking for a second, like kind of Group One in the Junior A, like where you've Cara, Mahoonas, Plunkets, and Ballinascarthy all battling to kind of get out of that group and get into the knockout stages. Kind of maybe Cara into surprise packets. Like they're topping the group after 3 points from 2 games, so they're undefeated. Drew with Ball in their opening game, and then had a good win against Mahoonas. So they have a good chance of getting through. Like they're playing Plunkets this weekend, and then you've Mahoonas against Ball, where Ball will hope to get the win. That might kind of jump them over Plunkets if Cara beat Plunkets. There's the permutations are, I'm not going to say endless because they're not, like, but there's a lot of permutations there. So it makes for a really exciting weekend and a really busy weekend. And already kind of next week's Star Sport is looking like a bumper edition.
It is, no doubt about it. And it'll be very interesting to see which sides progress to the various knockout stages and who will be involved in relegation playoffs. We'll have to see on next week's podcast. We'll take a quick break now, and after the break, we'll be discussing everything Carbery Camogie.
The Star Sport podcast is brought to you by Access Credit Union. Access Credit Union, funding dreams for over 50 years.
So welcome back to the podcast, and in a while we'll be joined by Moira Barrett and Niamh Kennedy before Carbery's Senior Camogie Championship preliminary quarter-final game against Blackrock this weekend. So yeah, Kieran, it's a very interesting game, I would say, for the Carbery Camogie team, and considering as well in the group stages of the divisional championship, Carbery only played 1 game. They beat Seandún, but their other 2 games after that against Musgrave and Avondhu were walkovers. So they're in kind of a weird position, one would imagine, going into this preliminary quarterfinal.
Yeah, it's not ideal for Carbery in that sense. They'd much rather prefer to play the games. So Carbery beat Seandún in their divisional opener. That was back in August 15th, and that was a super win of 218 to 1-8. Moira Barrett got 1-3 that day. Millie Condon, the Cork senior, I think she got 1-1. Even McCarthy got 3 points. Sarah Burrows chipped in. Like, it was a super win for Carbery, and they were ready to kick on then. Their next group game was meant to be against Musgrave, and that was to be in Newcestown on a recent Monday night. But that game was postponed. Sorry, it wasn't postponed. It was Musgrave conceded it. So Carbery were given a walkover. So that put them into the divisional final against Avondhu. And that game was meant to take place at Castle Road last Sunday. I think it was a 3:45 p.m. throw-in, and I got word, I suppose, just before midday last Sunday that Avondhu conceded that game as well, handed Carbery a walkover. So all of a sudden, Carbery, having played 1 game instead of 3, they find themselves in a preliminary quarter-final of the County Senior Championship against a Blackrock team who have played 3 group games, and it's a Blackrock team who is a club outfit. So these players train together, they play together. So obviously they're going to be a lot more cohesive and on the same wavelength, far more so than a Carbery team that has played 1 game all year. And even this week, they can't even meet up this week for a training session because it's just so busy with all the club games going on at the moment, both in the Camogie Championship and in the Cork Ladies Football Championship as well. So the preparation hasn't been ideal for Carbery, but that's been the hand that they've been dealt. They're trying to make the most of it and just put the best possible team out in the pitch at Castle Road on Sunday evening and see where that takes them. There's still an awful lot of talent within that team. Like mentioned the likes of Moira Barrett and Millie Condon, but you also have Libby Coppinger from St. Colum's, a 2-time Camogie All-Star. Kind of you've players of that ilk there. Again, it's asking an awful lot of them to come together after a busy weekend. And some of these players, it's worth saying, they have 3 championship games in the 1 weekend, which is far from ideal. And you can see Thursday Southern Star for more on that. So it's tough on these Carbery players, but at the same time, they do recognise the importance and honour of being able to represent their division in a big game like this. And it's probably worth saying too that this possibly could be the last year that we see divisional teams in the County Senior Championship, Matthew. There was a ruling earlier in the year where it looked like we wouldn't see divisional teams in this year's championship, but they got a derogation for this season. Will we see them back again next year? I don't know. I know what doesn't help the cause is when you have all these walkovers. It really doesn't help. You're trying to make a case for having divisional teams in the championship, but then when there's more walkovers than games in the divisional section, that does not help. And then when you see the divisional final as a walkover too, that doesn't help the case for divisional teams. And it's kind of when you see a division like Carbery, who's trying so hard to keep the divisional teams alive, that they put so much work into this, that the players within Carbery want to play for the region because they can see the worth of it. That allows them an opportunity to play senior. I come from a background where I 100% understand the worth of divisional teams, whether it's camogie or ladies football like the West Cork team years ago, or men's football or hurling. I get the concept, I understand the concept, and I'm a big fan of it for giving players from lower grades the opportunity to mix it at senior level. It's really important. So if this is to be the last season that Carbery are in the senior championship, hopefully they'll go out in a blaze of glory, and hopefully this Saturday's game won't be their final game. Hopefully that they can get through to the quarter-final proper. And ahead of the game, I caught up with Niamh Kennedy, who's the Carbery captain, and she's from Clonakilty. And I also caught up with Moira Barrett, who's the vice captain for Ballinascarthy, just to get their thoughts on the game coming up this weekend, the run to this stage of the championship, and also to kind of check in their respective clubs as well. So it's a huge game for Carbery Camogie this weekend, taking on Blackrock in a preliminary quarterfinal of the County Senior Camogie Championship. And delighted to be joined by Captain Niamh Kennedy and Vice Captain Moira Barrett. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much, Kieran.
We were just kind of chatting, dear Moira, just before we started recording, and Sunday's looking like quite a busy day, isn't it? Kind of got the big camogie game, but also a ladies football game with Clonakilty as well. So how are you going to juggle it all?
Yeah, look, it's difficult, and I suppose it's not ideal. And I know there's a lot of different people trying to stand up for us in each corner, and for, I suppose, player welfare and all that. But yeah, I suppose we'll try get the win in the football in the morning, and then get a bit of fuel and rest in between, and then switch our mind to the camogie then in the afternoon.
And it is a big camogie game. You've obviously kind of taken on Blackrock here. Let's talk about the journey for Carbery to get here so far. Unfortunately, there's been 2 walkovers along the way, but let's go back to that first game against Seandún, who were kind of, I think, 2-time county champions in the not too kind of distant past. Was that a real confidence boost to beat a team of that caliber?
Yeah, definitely. Because every other year when we play Seandún, they're so much better than us. They're at another level, whereas they hadn't done too much together as a team either, so we weren't really sure what to expect. And then on the day, then it just kind of everybody showed up on the day, and it was good. It was so much confidence boost then afterwards, just to know that we could beat them.
And Niamh, to beat a team like Seandún, it kind of highlights the talent that's within the Carbery division. Because I presume you probably didn't get together too much beforehand, but to go out and beat Seandún, it does highlight that there's a lot of talented players in this division.
Yeah, there's so much individual players. There's so many people coming off Cork teams and coming down, but everyone's so busy. It was just so difficult to get together. Teddy did so much work to try and get us to meet up and go to trainings and stuff, but it was with football and camogie, it was so hard.
Just on that, Moira, I suppose we know with divisional teams, it's quite hard to put it together, because especially at this time of the year, with the club action, both in camogie and in football. But you think it's really important to have that kind of those divisional outlet for players, for you to get a chance to show what you can do in a senior county championship environment?
Yeah, definitely. And I think the main thing with Carbery is if you can just get off the ground at all. Once we had that first game against Seandún, it was okay, we have a panel, we have numbers, we have players. So once we kind of got off the ground, we'll hopefully continue to keep going that way. But it's definitely so important. And it's lovely even to just play with girls from other clubs and to play at a higher level as well. I suppose more exposure for girls that want to be on Cork teams and things like that. The senior is obviously the highest they can get to, and there'll be a lot of other inter-county players playing at that level, so it is definitely important. But plenty of talent in West Cork, to be on it anyway, and to represent Carbery as well is great.
I want to go back, Moira, just I suppose earlier in the year when it looked like we wouldn't have divisional teams in the county senior championship. Of course, that obviously changed, which was good news for us here. But what was your thoughts when that came out first? That it seemed like divisional teams wouldn't be left in the county senior this year.
Yeah, I suppose disappointing really when we first heard it, because it is enjoyable, and like I get most enjoyment kind of playing with the girls in the other clubs, and like girls you would have been friends with, I suppose, underage and things. But definitely glad that we got reinstated. Like, I do understand some clubs' frustration and stuff at the divisions when there's so many clubs making them up. But I suppose on the other side of it, you should look at it that the standard of camogie is so high that like the divisions aren't winning all the time either, that clubs are well able to compete against us, and that it's nice to have the amalgamation as well to play at that level.
And Niamh, for you, kind of to get that chance to play with your division and also captain Carbery this year, like how much do you enjoy that?
Yeah, it's like I love playing camogie, so it's really good to get extra trainings and playing. Like, me and Moira only play football together as well, so it's nice to play camogie as well, something different. Same with, there's so many of us as well, and even like the girls, you never, even like Libby Coppinger, who's playing with Cork, and she's bringing her like higher standard down to play with us as well. So it's great. It's great to keep up the touch and stuff as well when you're not getting as much at the club.
That's a great point, Niamh. Like mentioning Libby there, obviously over the last couple of years, we've been so lucky here. Like obviously Orla Cronin before, go back a couple of years, the great things with Cork at the moment. Libby Coppinger flying the flag. Ciara Sullivan, unfortunately, she had her ACL injury. But Claire Kingston, of course, Millie Condon. We've been so fortunate. There's so many good players in the division, and to get players like that to play alongside those in a divisional team, like that must be just it's good for club players too, because it just helps raise standards across the board.
Yeah, definitely. The standard just like it's not as high at clubs. So then when you're playing with Carbery, you get to play against like people that are much better, and it makes everyone better then.
Same question to you, Moira, to play alongside the likes of a Libby Coppinger, like what's that like?
Yeah, it's brilliant. Like, she's an unreal leader on the pitch, and just her skill and stuff. I suppose like you'd know the level that they're training and playing at, the way they can pick out passes and stuff like that. And obviously it brings us all on playing at that level. But no, in fairness, like she's a brilliant role model, and like we're so lucky to have her in West Cork, and along with all the other girls as well. Like, there is great representation from Carbery with Cork and through the underage as well, like Sarah Burrows and those young girls that were coming up. I've no doubt that they'll definitely be on Cork teams in the future. So no, it's great to have Libby and all the girls as well.
Just in that again, Moira, the talent within the division, you get to see it week in, week out. You get to see it with the Carbery Camogie team as well. How good is that next generation coming up? Because we've had a lot of players at different age grades, kind of obviously be involved with Cork, but there is a lot of talent within Carbery Camogie.
Yeah, definitely. The underage, like, geez, I'd say if I started naming people now, I might get in trouble. But some of the younger girls are unreal, like their energy and everything, and like so fearless. I suppose to step up, like there was under 16 girls playing the last day, to step up to that senior level and just totally fearless. It's great to see it. But no, the future for Carbery with Cork teams is definitely bright. Like there's plenty of girls there, and the standard is very high. So hopefully, like, they'll gain a lot from playing with us as well, with Carbery seniors, and that hopefully they'll go on to more representation with Cork.
The immediate future for Carbery is against Blackrock this weekend, Niamh. How big a challenge will it be?
Blackrock are obviously unreal. Like, they came up from intermediate and they won that, and that's a big step. But they're not playing senior too long as well. But they're just going to be so much more physical than what we've come across. And they've obviously played a lot more matches than us because they've been in the championship, and we only played one together properly. So it will be tough.
But this is a great opportunity, Niamh, to go out and even cause a shock and just put Carbery Camogie on the map again, like you did when you beat Seandún. So going into the game the weekend, like you're coming up against a club team who've played, I think, obviously 3 group games. Do you feel the pressure will be off you small, but just to let you go out and express yourselves?
Yeah, probably, definitely, because like they do have something to prove as well, but so do we. And we're obviously a division team though as well, so we've got all the different clubs coming together. So the standard is high as well. So there's no pressure really at all. Everyone just needs to go out and try their best.
And Moira, it's obviously a busy weekend in the club front too, with Camogie. Just a few words on Bell here. One promotion last year, kind of up into the intermediate ranks. It's going pretty well so far. Is it 2 wins from 3?
Yeah, so 2 wins from three. We had I think 1 point lost to Slieverua on Thursday last. So I suppose regrouping now and we Valley Rovers this Friday, but definitely a higher level playing at again, and standards I suppose have to increase in training and everything. But no, it's really enjoyable, and like we're really lucky in Ballinascarthy that the club is so progressive, and like the people involved are brilliant. So hopefully it'll stay going, and like that it's not just an intermediate team they're building there, that it's a club that can go up through the ranks, hopefully through underage and everything. There's really good people involved. So yeah, no, we're really enjoying the challenge, and hopefully we can stay going.
Fantastic, and even exciting times for the Clonakilty camogie team as well. Are you through the quarterfinals in the Premier Intermediate?
Yeah, we are on Saturday. We're playing Ballinascarthy, so they'll be tough.
So you both have pretty busy weekends coming up. So thank you so much for taking the time to have a chat with us here on the Star Sport podcast. So best of luck with Carbery and with your clubs this weekend.
Thanks, Kieran.
Thank you.
The Star Sport podcast is brought to you by Access Credit Union. Access Credit Union, funding dreams for over 50 years.
So we mentioned earlier in the podcast, Kieran, that this week's Southern Star Sports section is a bumper edition. Do you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, it's 28 pages and it's absolutely packed. 28 pages is an awful lot for any regional paper to carrying the sports section on a weekly basis. But that's what we've been at the last couple of weeks, and that's because it's been so busy. So if you want to keep up to date with what's going on in West Cork sport, you really need to pick up the Southern Star, because it's so comprehensive. We remain the only place to read about the West Cork League to get the best coverage of the Carbery Junior Championships. We cover our local clubs better than anyone else as well. So it's just well worth checking out this Thursday Southern Star. So there's a load of obviously GA coverage in there, from the County Hurling Championships to the Carbery Hurling Championships, and also previews of the big games coming up this weekend in football, both at Carbery and county level. We have an exclusive chat too with Darragh McElhinney, the Glengarriff athlete who is competing at the World Athletics Championships that kick off in Tokyo this week. Darragh's from Glengarriff. I think I've been writing about Darragh probably since he was 14 or 15. I'm even thinking back, Matthew, to the 2016 Olympics. That was the year where Gary and Paul O'Donovan shot to prominence. But Darragh McElhinney was 15 years old at the time. He was in school in Clonakilty, yet he was taken out to Rio as a training partner for Arthur Lanigan O'Keefe, who was competing at those Olympics in Rio. So been charting Darragh's story for year after year after year. He hit a buffer, or he went off track there for 23, 24 in terms of he'd been on such a rise, but it just wasn't working for him, kind of. He'd a few tough years. But the great news is he's back on track this year. He's had PB after PB after PB in a great summer, and he's now going to line up in the men's 5,000 metres at the World Athletics Championships. So I had a super chat with Darragh on what happened these last 2 years. Where did you go? Can you fill us in on what was going on? And can you fill us in on your journey from there back to where you are now? So I really would recommend this read. So it's in Thursday Southern Star. And for anyone listening on the podcast, it's also available online on our e-paper and on the Southern Star website from 6 o'clock on Thursday morning. Also, we've an interview with Laura Nicholson from Ballinascarthy, who'll be competing in the women's 1500 metres at these World Championships as well. On top of that, the West Cork League Premier Division and Championships kicked off last weekend, and our feature match was Carbery Rangers B beating Baltimore. We have a super interview too with Bernard Brady, who is the kickboxing coach. He runs Ion Health and Fitness in Castletownbere, but he's coached three of his sons to become world kickboxing champions. So that's really worth to read as well. So there's an awful lot of quality reading in this week's Southern Star Sports. So it's well worth checking out.
Exactly. So, and as well in this week's Southern Star, there is supplements included in this week's paper, and the farming mag is included in this week's edition. It includes results from our Great West Cork farming survey for 2025. We talked to some high-profile sports people who are busy farmers themselves. We also chat to Carbery Mockra members about the association. There's West Cork farming in photos, farming news, and lots more in the magazine this week. So be sure to check that out. as well in this week's Southern Star. And as usual, if you are further afield or can't make it to the shops, you could subscribe to the Southern Star e-paper and get the Southern Star on your laptop, tablet or phone. Just go to www.southernstar.ie/subscribe, enter your details and you'll get an exact replica of the newspaper for less than €2 per week. As always, thanks for listening to the Star Sport podcast, and thanks again to our sponsors at Access Credit Union. If you've enjoyed this, please remember to rate, review and subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts, and we'll be back again next week. Until then, take care.